Hey friend, you are listening to the Field and Garden Podcast. It is your friend and host, Lisa Mason Ziegler, flower farmer, author, teacher, and entrepreneur, coming to you from southeastern Virginia. This podcast is where I can connect with you talking flower farming, cut flower gardening, business, and even on occasion, garden dogs. You're going to hear stories, my firsthand experiences, including my blunders, and just about everything in between when it comes to growing flowers. The Field and Garden Podcast is made possible by thegardenersworkshop.com, where our mission is to make it possible for flower lovers at all levels to grow and enjoy cut flowers for pleasure and for profit. Friends, after a recent visit with my good friend and cut flower extraordinaire, Dave Dowling, the experiences and ways of my flower farming business development have just flooded my memory and come back, and just spending time with those that have walked through experiences with you. Like Dave and I flower farmed, not together, but we're collaborators on a lot of stuff in the last 20 years. And I just thought I wanted to share in that hope of some steps that may simplify and give you hope, and really thinking about this as succession planting with annuals, which is kind of my jam, but how and when you're going to start bringing perennials and bulbs, and even woodies in, and how to do that in a way that is going to lead you straight to more success and not chew you up and spit you out, which is what we see happening when people race ahead of their time, right? So a real lifesaver for me was having a target of where you can go in this cut flower business. It's what offered me that hope and pulled me out of the mud more than once to know I wasn't going to be stuck where I was. And I will say that that is one of the unknown benefits of really walking with mentors and people that are doing things ahead of you, that you want to do what they're doing, because you can see, oh my gosh, it is so hard right now. I can do that. And, I can remember when every book that I've written, I always saying in my brain, I get to chapter 2 or chapter 3, and I think, oh my gosh, this is the hardest chapter, until I get to the next chapter. And then what am I saying? Oh my gosh, this is the hardest chapter. Having someone to just see them doing what you want to do, and they've gone ahead and they're doing it successfully, will pull you out of the stuck spot that you're in. And knowing this, that there are just so many options on ways to farm, crops to grow, the way you sell, who you sell to, means that there literally is a way to build a business for anybody that wants to do this. I mean, there are so many options and opportunities. When to start growing crops beyond the warm and cool season annuals, which is, the way that is recommended, the starting point for people going into business. Before you're bringing on additional plant families like perennials, bulbs, and woodies, which is definitely Dave Dowling's jam. It's going to be different for each business owner, but it is the next natural step to expand your business. But if there is one thing that Dave and I align on before you take that deep dive, that you must learn how, you should, you have a better chance of success. I mean, the statistics show it, that learning how to farm, how to sell, get customers, and to run a business, and you're not going to know everything, but to start that journey, to do that before jumping in to investing in high value crops at the beginning of your journey, before you even have any clue of what you're doing yet, right? So let's look at some ways to succession plant with annuals, bulbs, and perennials, and all of that. This will expand your cut flower business, along with some of the lessons that I've learned sprinkled in along the way. The one that I always think of first, and I say this because I know that I didn't do this back when, and I see people doing this. I won't say daily, but almost that common, is to maximize your growing space. Succession planting of annuals will ground your production and allow you to get the most out of your garden by planting different crops in that same space, right? Throughout your growing season. And it's that push and pull of that garden. It's almost like sometimes I think of my garden as a patchwork quilt. Like right now, I have in my garden, we're in June, and my garden has just newly planted transplants right alongside crops that are being harvested, right alongside some silage tarps on beds that are either holding a bed from growing weeds while we're waiting for the transplants to get ready, or it's extinguishing a crop that's done. This is how to get a lot of stems from the smallest space. And I just say this now as a reminder is to always have first on your mind. It's always about squeezing the most out of the least. So let's think about how we're going to extend the bloom season. As you're building your business, you're already harvesting and selling, and now the time has come to strategically start adding in perhaps perennials and bulbs and even woodies to your annual cash crops. So not only do you create more crops to sell to your existing customers, which is, friends, once you get, especially a couple of commercial customers, if that's the journey, the path that you're going, once you get them on board with high quality annuals, and then you start bringing in these other just totally unavailable crops, you will just create such a demand. But also, the depth of diversity in the offering just gets richer and richer and creates even more demand beyond your existing customers. And you're just layering and creating a continuous supply of stems to sell, from the earliest in spring right up through the first frost. So, taking this step, this is just a stop and pause for a moment. That sounds so dreamy, doesn't it? Right? All these extra flowers. But taking this step brings in more tasks and chores that need to fit in somewhere. And also, normally in a segregated space, meaning you don't grow annuals and perennials in the same bed. I wouldn't even grow them technically in the same garden. I mean, the garden space, when I'm just meaning like a block of beds. Um, Annuals and perennials have very different needs, and having them separate will simplify the process that is really getting more complex as we bring new crop families into our mix, right? And it's this complexity of more care is why it is recommended to start and learn how to flower farm with warm and cool season annuals because, they're low investment with high returns. And the reality is that at the beginning of your business, you don't even really know where you should plant perennials. I mean, you can't believe how much you move stuff around and figure things out about your property, about your workflow, about how you harvest and all that stuff. You not only don't know where to put them, you aren't even sure which maybe perennials or woodies will suit the business because you haven't even gone through a season or two yet, right? To know what you actually need. And I'm just saying that because it's so easy to feel like, oh, I'm just going to get them and put them in the ground. I went down that road, which I'm going to tell you about in just a minute here. You can just blow so many bucks, y'all, doing that before it's time. It's deep. And when I think back to those beginning years, and I think beginning years, I used to say 5 years and less. I would be almost willing to say for somebody that's bouncing around, not really following along with a plan or in a mentor type of situation where you actually have created rails for yourself to follow, 10 years or less, maybe. But you do not know what you do not know yet. And you have to trust those people that have gone before you and have made the mistakes and have spent the money and wasted the time. And, you know, so there's a method to all of this madness. So another really significant piece of this bringing on board additional families is avoiding gaps in the harvest. Beyond producing more cash crops to sell, which is the bottom line, right? Um, these repeat weekly succession plantings that fill in the gaps between this crop or that crop finishing and another one getting started. The use of these repeat crops of stuff like sunflowers and lilies, for example, are business builders. Not only do customers become incredibly reliant on you for those crops, but they become an income stream and a routine for you. And I can't tell you how significant those can be when they're piggybacked on an established selling business. So lilies and sunflowers both filled the gaps on my flower farm. I had standing room only for our programmed lily harvest. And then I also did 27 weeks of sunflower harvest that closed the gaps on our bouquet programs for supermarkets and then for florists standing orders because I focused on staple flowers always. And both of those were the ongoing icing on my cake. But I just want to mention a little note here. Just because you can grow something well and sell it does not mean that you should or continue to do that. And I'll tell you what I'm speaking of is the Lily program. So I did that. I tried to look back. I think it was like 3 to 5 years. I grew heavily programmed lilies, but I was under the constant threat of deer pressure. I did not have deer fence back then. And in my situation, the deer threat, because I grow outdoors, y'all, I have no structures. I had no real way. I didn't protect those lilies. I mean, we grew them for all those years without protecting them other than deer spray. And that pressure and worry and concern and threat of loss was stronger than the standing orders that I had them for. So guess what? I stepped back and evaluated with a surprising outcome. I stopped growing lilies. Yes, they were good income, but they were also costly. They were labor intensive. And then when you rolled up the threat of that I could be wiped out in one night, I decided not to grow them. And those are things that you have to do for your business, right? And then there's also that efficiency use of these resources. By planning and planting a succession strategy that just annuals, or you are bringing on perennials and bulbs that you can make the most of your time, your space, and other resources. It's like this strategy becomes your insurance policy for an abundant harvest. And that is the real success to growing your flower farming business. But guess what else it does? This also spreads out the workload and it allows tasks to become routines, better known, y'all, as a system. because systems work. Working out for you how to plan and actually make succession planting get done, to execute it, to see it through. While I was learning to balance and juggle all aspects of the flower farming business. So, what I'm saying by this, by really sticking to the simplicity of growing annuals that have the biggest bang for your buck while I was figuring this all out, led me to successfully bring into the crop plan the high value crops like the lily program that I grew. I mean, I grew tulips, grew some perennials. I mean, I went around all of those bins, and you can do that quite successfully, even more successfully when you have your sea legs, right? So figuring out your systems comes clear and quicker when you're only juggling 10 balls, right? Think about juggling 10 balls. And now you're going to bring in a new crop family. Well, guess what that brings? 10 more balls that all of a sudden now has to be juggled. And it's really hard to succeed when you're having to learn to juggle while you keep piling on more balls to juggle, right? You know, my methodology is learn and then add. Learn and then add. Learn and then add. It is also hard when you keep piling on the balls because you're constantly dropping them. And that's when it gets really, really hard to get up and keep doing it every day. And that's where your community, your supportive community, I will say that one of the most heartwarming things as a mentor and instructor to my students, going into our community, seeing all the successes is very heartwarming. But when somebody comes in and just spills their guts over some total wreck that happens, whether it's a customer gone wrong or a crop loss or a disaster weather, and to just see all the other students rally around those people, um, that's the real win for me. And because it is really hard to get up every day and feel like you're getting kicked in the gut over and over again. But guess what, friends? That is what business is kind of like. And when you have a cheerleader group at your side, their hands on your back, it just makes getting up easier. The slow and steady for the big win, along with others that are also on that same path. I just can't even tell you the success. So, what's another thing? It's the diversity of growing a variety, of bringing in over time. One of the things that Dave talks about in his bulbs, perennials, woodies, and more course is, I think I forget the numbers. There's a lot of bulbs, there's a lot of perennials, and there's several, I think, I can't remember the numbers, and a lot of woodies. And he's actually had people just try to start everything. His recommendation, pick 5 or 10 at the most. And that's where you start. Grow a variety of perennials, bulbs, and woodies alongside your established system of growing succession planted 3-season annual garden can save the day. A great way to start is to bring in a few perennials and even a woody or two. They can just add the much needed harvest just when you need it. Focusing on those that support what your business actually needs. Because, friends, I am not talking about shopping online and randomly ordering plants to try. That is what gardeners do. That is not what commercial cut flower farmers do. Okay. Frankly, you don't have to try it. They've all been tried. And if you're doing this as a business, you need to focus on the proven plants that will contribute to your bottom line. And, in the future, once you've got your sea legs and your belts on tight, you can explore and experiment. And I that's a whole nother conversation. There is just endless options for you to grow that are proven that you don't have to experiment. A couple of examples of a perennial woody that literally saved me were peonies and hydrangeas. So, peonies literally floated our bouquet program for supermarkets, becoming our main. Peonies became our main focal flower, and allowing us to make Mother's Day bouquets. And, our peonies do bloom during May and early May. And that was huge because we have tons of cool flowers, but I didn't have a spectacular focal flower. Peonies did that. And we usually get about 1,500 stems. And so, in addition to that, we can also sell any of those extra stems that created incredible cash flow from our florist. They were clamoring at the bit to get some of those. And then our hydrangeas filled our bouquets for the supermarkets all summer long as filler. One nice hydrangea per bouquet. Just people love hydrangeas, y'all. Filled it out. We use them in all stages, super fresh to right up through when they started to dry. And I have two hydrangea groves. They are basically carefree and incredibly productive. We have to work on keeping them weeded. But other than that, they pull their weight. But again, remember, separate garden spaces, very different maintenance, more balls to juggle. But these crops were worth it to me to bring on board because they supported what I was selling, right? And another great consideration is what grows well and easy in your region. With annuals, I've created resources, courses, books, just tons of information, right? That makes it really clear what is a warm and what is a cool annual and how to apply what they need to wherever it is that you're growing. When that is practiced, we see those folks are the ones that are producing incredible abundance and quality with the least amount of inputs and just the least amount of work, right? It is the same is true for perennials, woodies and bulbs, those things that fit your region and your conditions. And one of the things that Dave just nails in his flower farming school is guiding you through, what the requirements are for this particular one. How can you figure it out? Do you have them? Can you create them? He talks about shade houses. I mean, there's just, for some of us, I prefer to find the plants that fit my natural conditions, but you can tweak your conditions, and he gives you tips on that too. I tell you, it's just important to fit these new crop families that you're going to be bringing on board to your local conditions. That's the easiest way to do it and the most cost effective. An example of way back when, y'all remember, when I started flower farming, we barely had the internet. So I blew a bunch of bucks. I won't even tell you how much trying to grow lilacs here in the South. I mean, the big, voluptuous, gorgeous things you see that only grow in the North. I tried to do it in the South. They grew, they suffered, tortured me, tortured them. And finally, after 3 years, I pulled them and ditched them. You know, Expensive, unnecessary lesson. But of course, I didn't have all the resources that we have today. But that was, I mean, Steve couldn't believe we were pulling them out. He didn't get it. Do you know what I mean? It's like these are the kicks that it's hard for you, but sometimes even for those people that are trying to support us in this business, see us making really stupid mistake, which that was a stupid mistake that I made. It just kind of not, it's something you can avoid. You just don't want to go down that road. And so the last thing that I want to mention is weather, and in these days of just crazy weather and climate change, when you diversify, There's usually a planting somewhere on your farm or garden that is loving life and thriving in whatever the current condition is. But at the same time, there's a planting somewhere on your garden or farm that is suffering and hating life as it is. Um, when you really grow a 3-season garden and then annual garden and then start layering on perennials and bulbs and woodies, you increase your chances of having more success alongside those failures with your diversifying and succession planting. That's the best part. You know, I can remember back in the early days when I just didn't have much planted, much variety, and, whether a downpour would lay something out or the deer ate something to the ground or whatever, I was devastated. Now it's like, oh, well, move on. I mean, we have other stuff to cut. There's no belly aching anymore. And that's kind of, it allows you to get that strong muscle to do that because you have other stuff to choose from. You know, a great example of the weather variation is, for me with cool and warm season annuals, when we have one of those long, true spring weathers, cool nights, warm days with a little bit of rain thrown in, doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Cool flowers, which are cool season hardy annuals, if you're not familiar, perform so much longer into summer under those conditions. I mean, in July, we still have sweet peas and snapdragons throwing down out in the garden, right? But on the years that it's the opposite of that, it gets hot and dry early. It's like summer arrives weeks and weeks earlier. That means cool flowers, start petering out much earlier, but the warm season tender annuals jump into action sooner. And that's a winner. So there's always a winner and a loser, no matter what the weather is, when you plant with a diverse mix. So, friends, learning how to farm, practice for a couple of seasons on annuals, reap in some bucks to invest in those high invest crops that are going to be right coming down the pike before you know it. A couple of seasons with annuals, mastering growing and selling and the business is the journey that we see people that continue to flower farm. They're still in the game at year 5, and then many of them at year 10. So when you are ready to take the next natural step to expand into more crop families, you will have the very best chance of succeeding. And I might say the cash to buy them when you do low investment, high return annuals. Starting and growing a flower farm and business, focusing on building a strong foundation to grow and stand on for an abundant mix of diverse annuals, bulbs, perennials, and woodies will lead to years of successful flower farming, because then it just gets, I don't want to use the word easier, but it does. You still have all the hard work of farming, but you've set your system in place. So, friends, thanks for joining me here today. And I just want to remind you that over at thegardenersworkshop.com is home base to everything we do, from our weekly live gardening shopping shows, blogs, videos. Sign up for our farm news to stay in the loop on our happenings, open farms, course offers, timely content. There's just so much over there. And everything we do, friends, we do it for you. Till we meet again. Ciao.